Welcome to Clean Plates, where every bite tells a story. I'm Brian Romaine, joining you on a culinary journey to understand the whys behind our diets and desires. Welcome to Clean Plates, where every bite tells a story. I'm Brian Romaine, joining you on a culinary journey to understand the whys behind our diets and desires. First and foremost, thank you for joining me on this adventure with food. This first episode will be an introduction to myself, my background in culinary and food, and why I decided to start this podcast. I'm also here to give you my real story. My intentions are to give you some of my knowledge on who I am as a person. My goal is that by the end of this, we'll be ready to embark on a truly wonderful and tasteful experience. I was born in Overland Park, Kansas, Missouri if you count the hospital. But where I grew up from my childhood until 18 years of age was Overland Park. A populated yet down-to-earth and bright neighborhood filled with lovely folks from all walks of life. As a young boy, I can remember after kindergarten enjoying things like Blue's Clues and Nick Jr. with peanut butter, banana sandwiches, applesauce. I mean, you know how kids are. My parents did work hard and planned and made sure that 3 kids could eat well growing up. I love you guys for that. The fridge always had a variety of healthy foods in it. To this day, my parents' food game is on point. I can recall in the late 90s as a treat with friends in the neighborhood. Well, we also would just play on the play place or, just enjoy the sitting down in the play place area to eat with my parents, mostly my mother. But for the most part, my parents would cook all of my food growing up and did make sure that I grew up healthy and wasn't eating processed foods all the time. Now, growing up in Overland Park, Kansas was wholesome. I'm from a family of 5, and we all ate a lot of meals together. The kitchen table was always packed with conversation and engagement. We always talked about our days, our highs, our lows, things that we learned in school. In retrospect, it was very nice growing up like this. Communication was always pretty large in my family, and so I'm thankful for that exposure. Now, breakfast in our house consisted of things like cereal for each sibling's taste, some sort of juice, usually orange. My parents always bought those frozen, concentrated juices, whether it was like I said, mostly orange juice. We had some limeades and some other ones around as well. My dad would always buy these big things from Sam's Club of these big Texas cinnamon rolls so that on days that I needed something quick with my cereal, even though it was a total sugar bomb, I would make one of those in the morning. We always had fresh fruit around, things like toaster strudels. My mom would cook a lot of poached eggs. She had this pan that I loved where you would fill it up with water and butter up the triangles inside of it. And then you would crack eggs, boil them, and just get the most perfect poached eggs. Because if you timed it right, the yolks were absolutely perfect and just delicious. As I got older, I started going to school regularly, like most children, and my likes and dislikes of certain foods started to really develop. We don't really realize that food is so essential that from the time we're babies, we start taking in all of our nutrients in the form of breast milk. That eventually evolves into baby food, then solid foods, and so on and so forth. there's just a time that will develop your taste and all of your likes for different things such as that. But of course, as the years went on and elementary school started becoming more of the primary prominent years, I started really enjoying school lunch. Let's just take a second here, folks, and dial it back and simply remember and reminisce in the fond memories of school lunch. Now, I can understand if you did not like school lunch and or you brought your own food from home, because I did that plenty as well. But, I'll of course admit that the programs with food, even back then, probably weren't ultimately the optimal, most healthiest food, being standard American, diet food coming from bigger corporations to fund an elementary school. But I mean, let's be honest, for kids, it was delicious and it worked, just because every kid to this day has some sort of memory about school lunch. I mean, for my elementary school, it was things like those big square pizzas. We had spaghetti days, sub sandwiches. I mean, chicken parmesan that was the most unauthentic and non-Italian as it got, where it was just a patty, the noodles, meat sauce with a little melted shredded mozzarella on top. But for us, it was like we were living in Italy. Things like who could forget chicken nuggets, nachos, burritos, those octagon shaped Mexican pizzas with all the fixings on it to make it somehow Mexican. I mean, cinnamon rolls were to live for when I was in elementary school, middle school, and high school. And yes, I just said to live for. I don't tend to say to die for when it comes to food, because I want to live for the experience. You always had your choice of regular milk, chocolate milk, strawberry milk throughout school. But in elementary school specifically, we always had these mini slushies you could pay 50 cents extra for and get, your choice of a dozen different flavors. So that was always a pretty cool thing to do. I remember going into middle school and the ever so tempting a la carte became a thing in everyone's world, including mine. All of those wild goodies, such as spicy chicken sandwiches, triple X cheeseburgers, Bosco sticks with the red sauce on the side, the marinara. You had soda, Minute Maid juices, candy, the whole 9 yards. Every blue moon, like truly every blue moon, once in a while, I would grab something from that a la carte. But I learned quickly and always had it in the back of my head that I had a budget. My parents would math out as much money as it cost for the $2.80 for 28, 30 days, whatever it is in the month. And they knew. They just knew if something was off, because there were just a couple of times where, I bought some a la carte lunch or just some expensive stuff for like chips or desserts or cookies or anything of that matter. And they knew right away because they just had that math down. So I learned quickly after a few lectures that that's probably best to stay away from that stuff. But high school was the peak of school lunch because, you somehow feel like you're an adult, because I had a job in high school. So I had extra money sometimes where I would buy, things like the drug of choice in high school, of course, the Otis Spunkemeyer melted cookies out of the, toaster oven on a fresh plate with some ice cold milk. That's just basically asking for it. But Yeah, I mean, I loved high school lunch because I was a teenager. I was fully developed in my palette of flavors. And, some days there was some gross stuff that they were serving that I wasn't really particularly fond of, but I can't really remember anything that really just made me just wig out in high school. But I mean, I knew every night that I was going to be getting a good home cooked meal. So I always looked forward to something that my dad was preparing because dinner each night was mostly prepared by my father. Growing up, my father had his own painting and contracting business. So he woke up really early every single day and got home fairly early in the day because he had already done a long shift of doing painting jobs, being on ladders, ceiling work. I mean, he did it all. So shout out to him for breaking his back every day just to make sure I could eat every day. And same thing goes for my mother because my mother was always working a corporate job, late hours, 9 to 5 on paper, but more like 9 to 6 or 7 most nights, different projects with corporate cable. So they both busted their hinds just so that I could, and my siblings and I could eat. So shout out to them. But my dad would get home mostly around like 4 or 5 o'clock, and he would start cooking dinner after he had showered, relaxed a little bit. And, he made some awesome stuff growing up. I mean, my dad had this natural gift that he just developed over time and had a wide range of palate for things like honey baked seasoned chicken, stir fry, fajitas. He would grill up his own burgers after he mixed up, burger meat with things like onions or different peppers or barbecue sauce or seasonings. He was always on point with it. He made pork chops with cinnamon. I was, as a kid, I was so perturbed, but he was like, just try it. Just try a bite of it. And to his credit, there are things that I now still enjoy because he fed them to me as a kid. And I just would have never thought of that. But, that's the cool part about being an adult is that you have all this knowledge and then you're, spreading it on to your children. So I just think that's really cool that my dad didn't just automatically cop out where, of course, there were nights where, as a kid, my mom would be working as a banker and at JC Penney's, and he would have to, do stuff during the day as painting days where he would have to feed me like hot dogs and macaroni or, go to Whole Foods and buy a pizza and just bake it in the oven because that was his favorite kind of pizza is the take and bakes from Whole Foods. But, like I said, my father was, to this day, is a very, very talented cook. And so is my mother. She just cooks more simple things and is a good baker, as well as she's really good at holiday cooking. So it was like she can cook with a whole room of people and also nail out a lot of different, very good, simple recipes. So shout out to both of them. It's crazy. I can't even imagine being a parent in the late 90s and early 2000s or being a parent today. So credit to both of them. As I got older, eventually throughout high school and then college, I moved out of the house. That was a whole new era of me making my own decisions when it came to food because once you move out of the house, there's only like one mock trial. My parents, when I went to college in Minnesota and they helped me move into my first apartment, they took me to a grocery store. They showed me kind of how it is to walk around in a grocery store. Not that I had never been in one. Obviously, I had been in tons of grocery stores, tons of different times growing up, but it's just way different when you're making your own decisions. You're just alone shopping. So, like, they showed me where different produce was, different proteins, what I can put together to make different meals. But I never thought of it outside of the box of like, there was a handful of times where I cooked with both my parents or individual or cooked for myself at the house, but the food was already bought. It was mostly oven food. You know, it wasn't a lot of pan stuff or like, you know, baking in the oven. It was just like pizza rolls and, you know, stuff that was just frozen that just went into the oven and ready to go. So it was a big step. I remember just learning how to shop for myself and being like, oh, I'm 19 now and I need to learn how to buy food and make my own food. So, you know, of course, I knew that my diet mattered, but I always just was eating for, excuse me, full, you know, being full, satisfied. It was tasting good, you know, a lot of dopamine factors, you know, is just, I was always partying in college. So that was a pretty big factor on, you know, how I ate and my relationship with food kind of mixing all together because I started drinking a lot. You know, I was definitely making that decision on my own a lot and just disregarded my health in general just because, you know, if it was the morning, for example, before class, I was always hitting up the Super America, which was just the gas station next to my apartment complex. You know, me and my roommate, we both went to the same college, had a few classes together. So we were up early, you know, getting ready for school. But, you know, we were like smoking pot and then going to the gas station to eat things like donuts and coffee, you know, maybe, you know, smoking a cigarette with that. You know, you're talking about just all the little Debbie's breakfast, quote unquote, Danishes. You know, it's like everything a gas station has to offer. And of course, you have this little card that you can boost points up. So, like, I thought I was like beating the system because I was getting, you know, free donuts and, you know, just like all sorts of just sandwiches, you know, all that stuff. And just no, it was never healthy. It was never good for me. You know, it was just always to just cheap, be full, and just kind of, you know, get it over with. But yeah, I mean, that was college. I mean, lunch was always 7-Eleven chili dogs. We always went to this sports bar called Sporties. I know it sounds generic, but it was a small sports bar in Minnesota that we would just drink beer and eat things off the menu. Like they had this crazy burger that reminded me of a burger growing up back home in by the lake house. And it was jalapenos, peanut butter, and like a spicy jam. So it was like a peanut butter burger. Oh, and it had, you know, pepper jack cheese on it, of course. So it was like a spicy peanut butter burger. And, you know, there's this place by the lake house that had just peanut butter on their burger. They called it Goober Burgers. They were absolutely wild and delicious. And as a kid, I thought it was so gross, but as an adult, I, you know, really became to enjoy that. So we would always sit at sporties during our breaks or go to, you know, somewhere downtown and eat lunch there. Or there was like a student lounge that was called like the record room downstairs of this music college that I was going to that, you could get waffle fries and, other sandwiches, deli stuff, chips. But, it was always overpriced and pretty expensive and just, I mean, never anything like a salad or anything fresh like that. I mean, I know it was around, but I just never had that for lunch. But, we were always by nighttime chasing down Miller High Lifes, ordering up Chinese food or pizza for the crew because we were getting ready for the next party. I mean, we were getting ready for just the next go, 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 go. Just eat here with the handheld, go to the bar, go to the next bar, go to the party, go to the after party, go to the sun up, sundown party. Can you see a pattern here, folks? My drinking revolved around my eating, and my eating revolved around my drinking because it was becoming to get out of hand. And it did not stop for several years of just, as I went through my late 20s, I continued to drink a lot and make poor eating choices. I mean, I continued to cook for a job too in bars and grills or barn grills and late night kitchens. And I would go out and stay out all night with cooks and friends alike because people in the entertainment industry, music industry, promoters, bartenders, cooks. I mean, we all partied together. We were like a walking billboard for Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. But I was delighted. I was excited, ambitious, but I was also sad, depressed, exhausted. And I felt it all at the same time. It was like a roller coaster of just the wave of emotions. Some days it would work. I would get by life with the beer and a cheeseburger in my hand. And, some days I just would be so sad. I would not want to leave my house and just order takeout and still making cheap cocktails at home and just drinking and eating and drinking. And my mind was never settled. Over time, I sought out therapy and I did deal with a lot of the issues that I had under the hood. I thought I had cleaned up house internally. I got in my first real relationship and 10 months more in Minneapolis. I've moved to Colorado in the summer of 2013. I thought I was making moves of the right direction. At that point, I had just seen a lot of Minneapolis and I had an opportunity to come out to Colorado. So I jumped right on that. Shout out to my buddy Happy Feet, my boy Tyler. We drove out here together. And that was a long time ago. That was over 11 years ago because that was the summer of 2013 when I moved to Colorado. I got my first job out here at a bakery called So Perfect Eats. I did dishes, did deliveries, as well as, stocking. This place was amazing. The owner and Linda, she taught me about high-end baking, things like macaroons and other little French desserts and treats, cooking technique, flavor complex. I mean, for the holidays, she would go all out and make baked salmon, chicken, appetizers, desserts, all sorts of good stuff. Like, I'll never forget this sandwich that she had called the Thankful Turkey. Oh, it was a doozy, folks. You had oven baked organic turkey, pulled apart with brie cheese, handmade cranberry chutney, and imported honey mustard from a bistro in France. It just doesn't get any better than that. It had the perfect, and I mean perfect balance of savory, sweet, spicy. It was rich, but still able to be eaten, all of it. And I'll never forget it. All of that insanity between two slices of fraked ciabatta bread. Eventually, after several months, unfortunately, working there, it got bought out by the law office that it was like kind of connected and located to. I know that, Linda was ready to get out of it because she had been out there for a long time, but I'll just never forget how much of an impact I had as a first job working for her. So shout out to Linda. Over the next 3 years, I worked at multiple restaurants in Denver, including Park Burger, Pizza Republica, Tap and Dough, City O City, Denver Biscuit Company, Bijou's. I worked a lot of different places because it just always became apparent that when you work somewhere, that if you got comfortable, you had to find the right crew of people. So even just getting comfy in a kitchen working there, if, I had a lot of different run-ins with a lot of different people, just working crazy busy lines. It's a lot of experience that you just, it's a lot. So I grinded on that kind of scheduling and, didn't even have a car at the time. I would actually ride my bike to work most days, every day, those jobs. So, I did that for a while and lived that lifestyle of a lot of the morning shifts because, I wanted to still have days where I can enjoy myself and do things at nighttime. But yeah, it eventually would just wear on me. And, the days where I would work so hard and then have a shift drink after work and then ride my bike home and have more drinks. And then it just affected everything because it was just a whole cycle of turning into depression real quick. But you just don't realize it because you're working so hard and you think that you're working your way up in the kitchen and then something happens and then you leave that kitchen, then you go to another kitchen and it's just a cycle of, what happened for me personally. Because then in 2017, I got out of my first serious relationship and I decided to try a new career, take a break from cooking, take a break from all of the line business and being, super dirty at, night and just exhausted. And, my hands were just cut up and scarred up and burned up from all the learning from cooking. But I never forgot it. Even back then, it was like, I will never forget this. I got into the cannabis industry. That was what I decided to venture into next because I'm good at sales, but I just wanted to something that I had passion in as well. And I was going to try to eventually mold the two worlds together of cooking and cannabis. I thought that, I could have some sort of product or sauce or condiment or edible or something that would eventually catch. But, it was just me working retail jobs and doing other delivery services as well as production in grows and warehouses that, I ended up doing just because the edible market was so just limited that at the time, that's what was available with the experience that I had. I only had very little experience that I got the opportunity to work in those cannabis jobs and, super thankful for that as well. But the eating and the drinking in relationship just never got solved. It still continued to be an issue because just because this was a new job and a new career, it was like I still had to make my own choices of either bringing my own food to work or going out and buying it. Now, the dispensary that I worked at first had like a banh mi restaurant and like a Chinese takeout and some, Hispanic food around us. But, it just got old really quick, even when you cycled through all those places. And, I was usually hungover or just weaning till my next party night with my coworkers because we were always going to the bars after we shut down the dispensary, or I was going home to make plans with people. It was like every night was a Friday night when it came to just my life for the longest time. So I was always trying to involve myself with community, even if it was something that involved eating terribly cooked bar food and just drinking beer all night long. I felt like I was doing something right. And so this continued for years and years and years and years because it just affected all of my jobs, whether it was one industry or another. It didn't matter. One relationship or another. It didn't matter. Job after job, person after person. By 2020, I had already had a few DUIs. I was slowly being addicted to a lot of drugs and I was alone. My drinking was at its worst. My eating habits were even worse because I was just basically living off of Papa Murphy's pizza, takeout, eat those cold, reheat, it was a cycle. On September 13th of 2020, I actually enrolled in a patient rehab program where I lived in a sober living home for 2 months. So 60 whole days. It was there I started over, reintroduced myself to me, and I found a new relationship in life. And more importantly, in food. Because I had to buy a certain amount of groceries each week on a budget of $80. It eventually, I think, got up to like 100 or 120. But yeah, for the longest time, it was like pretty much just $80. So every week, I just learned how to buy this much of this much of that, and make balanced meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We made a family meal on Sunday, each Sunday. It was always great. I love that community of us all hanging out together and just being able to grow as individuals and as a group and make food together, break bread, talk about our highs and lows. Like it was like a family. Like it reminded me of when I was growing up again. And it was really, really cool because everyone would laugh and, everyone was sober and happy. And it was cool. This time of therapy and healing myself in so many ways was extremely necessary and helpful for these next years ahead. Because I'm so thankful I went to rehab because it saved my life. And without it, I would not be the person I am today. So shout out to Red Rocks Recovery. And Cole and Carolyn and everybody that was involved in that process, thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, over the last several years, I've put so much hard work into myself. That includes my mind, my body, my spirit, everything included. You know, I'm also enjoying my relationship now with food, which is still going to be an ongoing journey for the rest of my life, but that's how it is. And I love that. You know, I'm all about it. Fast forward now to 3 years and several months later to now current me. I work out 2 to 3 times a week. I follow a meal plan. Shout out to my boy Tyler Holt for putting that together. He's a great friend, mentor, and thank you. Thank you for that, buddy. You know, and I'm building a wonderful community with my amazing girlfriend, and I'm really, truly loving life. My goal here at Clean Plates is to dive deep inward with my guests on the big factors of their food choices and why they make those choices. Heck, I mean, why does anyone make any choice to eat anything? I intend to study food trends, research news on up and coming food studies, as well as browse and bring up topics pertaining to food on solo episodes or with my guests. I want to say thank you again for joining me on today's flavorful journey here at Clean Plates. If you enjoyed our exploration into the world of food and my story behind my eating habits, be sure to subscribe where you get your podcasts. Don't forget to share your own food stories and thoughts with on my Instagram at either Brian_Waterleaf or the podcast's Instagram, which is clean_plates_podcast. Thank you for joining me today on our flavorful journey here at Clean Plates. If you enjoyed our exploration into the world of food and the stories behind our eating habits, be sure to subscribe where you get your podcasts. And don't forget to share your own food stories on my personal page at Brian Waterleaf or the Clean Plates podcast page on Instagram. And remember, every plate has a story and we are here to discover them together. So stay curious, keep exploring, and continue to nurture your relationship with food. I'm Brian Romaine, and until next time, keep your plates clean and your hearts full.